There's some threatening clouds above Watkins Glen, but we should be okay. It's time for some more NASCAR here on NBCSN with Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series final practice from upstate New York as we welcome you back to the Glen. And nothing like the season's final road course just to throw a little bit of a wild card into this playoff scenario.
Well, the playoff standings are crazy with 18 winning. Now it's down to just 3 spots available on points, and I'm thinking that number could still shrink yet again this weekend. We have Boyer, Logano below the cut line. I think either of those drivers have cars and the experience to win here at the Watkins Glen Road Course.
Now, in this final Cup Series practice and in this afternoon's Xfinity Series Zippo 200, we're doing something a little bit different for you folks. Steve and I are here in the NASCAR on NBC booth right above the start-finish line, as is the case each and every year. But over in the S's is MRN's and the man you hear on Sirius XM Satellite Radio, NASCAR Channel 90, Mike Bagley. In the carousel, a little further around the lap, is Parker Kligerman. And in turn 6, it's another hot spot on this Glen circuit, is Jeff Burton. And we'll just kind of throw it around a little bit. If you were with us for the first practice session earlier today, it's kind of a hybrid coverage, a little bit of TV, a little bit of radio, and it's a lot of fun. First session, we really enjoyed it. Hope you did too. So that'll be the way that we're doing it in this practice session, and we'll also do it in this afternoon's race. Want to kick things off as we see one of the 2 drivers in the group, Jeff Burton, arriving late. There's nothing new about that, but we want to kick it off with the bagman, Mike Bagley.
Hey, Lee, we're looking for several things here in the S's as we work our way through this final practice for tomorrow's race here at the Glen. First, we're looking for everybody to calm down. We saw a rather aggressive practice session early on. A lot of drivers getting into trouble at a very fast portion of the racetrack. Coming out of turn 1, running downhill into turn number 2. We saw some drivers break loose, make some contact with the wall, but it's all about fine-tuning that race car, getting as much speed as possible, and you'll need that speed over the course of the race tomorrow. Once the drivers clear the S's here at Watkins Glen, the uphill climb to turn 3 through turn 4, they'll work their way to the back straightaway and let that speed fly and get prepared for one of the hardest braking zones on this racetrack. It's known as the inner loop, and it's also known as the bus stop.
Right, Bagman, and actually that's what a lot of these drivers have been struggling with, and what I'll be watching in this practice is the lack of downforce. They're carrying a tremendous amount of speed. We saw speeds of almost 180 miles an hour as they came into the bus stop here, but they also have a smaller spoiler this year, lower downforce, and a lot of the drivers were talking about these cars being on edge, being a little bit out of control. Dicey was one of the words that was said by Way. So I think I'm going to be watching for the drivers and the teams able to kind of find some comfortableness in these race cars as they come through the inner loop or the bus stop and then into the carousel, where that lack of downforce is really affecting some of these cars on the exit and the shoot down to turn 6 where you're at, Jeff.
Sorry, I'm new to this, but I think one of the larger issues is as teams get ready. Remember, they qualify tomorrow. This is different than what we normally do. Qualifying tomorrow, you only have 55 minutes here, so you have to continue making your race runs after a session in which you didn't get as much track time as you wanted to in that first session. So now they have to work on their race stuff. They're going to get 1 or 2 shots at a Q run, that's it, and then Q tomorrow. So I think that puts a lot of pressure on these teams after a shortened practice because of so many cautions and red flags in that first session.
Here's the breakdown of the whole thing. Burton, I'm confused when you said you were new at this. Was it the mic button that got you?
Yeah, see this right here? I got to push that. And you know me, Steve. Too many things at once, and I get overloaded quickly.
I think he was adjusting the flamingos on the front of the scissor lift there.
We'll see if this practice session will be a little more successful for the 88 of Dale Jr. He spun out basically this exact spot in the first session, climbing or actually descending down into turn 1. You see following his teammate, the 5 of Casey Kane gets loose. Well, so doesn't the 88 of Dale Earnhardt Jr. Spun around. No real damage. Flat spots some tires, but no damage to the race car.
It was an eventful session. Junior was just one of many examples and incidents in the opening 55-minute session that was punctuated with 3 red flag periods. It was a real start-stop affair. And all these guys want to do, every driver in the field just wants to get laps, build some momentum. Have enough so that they can end this practice day. Remember, it's a condensed weekend, just like in Pocono, where tomorrow, qualifying and racing the same day, and they just want to build that feedback. We may not see the defending race winner race tomorrow because Denny Hamlin's longtime girlfriend is pregnant, heavily pregnant, about to give birth. Regan Smith is on standby, and if it's looking like the birth's about to happen, Denny will leave the track.
Yeah, he kind of made that public today in the media center that he's going to make that his priority. I applaud him for that. You know, it's a major commitment FedEx has in this race team, and Joe Gibbs Racing has in Denny Hamlin. But as a father, that's a huge commitment as well, Marty.
And Steve, I talked to Regan Smith earlier today, and he said, you know, I was going to wait until race day to come up. He said, nah, I just wasn't comfortable doing that because literally Jordan could be in the hospital at any moment. So that I just talked to Denny about it as well, and he said, I thought about going back to Charlotte tonight after this final practice session. He said, nah, I'm just going to stay here in Watkins Glen and chance it. He said, the one thing, we don't know if we're having a boy or a girl. He said, that's the biggest thing. We found out with our first child, which was a girl. He said, we're not finding out this time. So he said, I'm a little nervous about that fact, but obviously making the priority of family this weekend, Lee, and that's certainly the right call from Denny Hamlin, obviously already in the playoffs as well with that win earlier this year.
I'm a planner, Diff. I don't think I could do that. I'd like to know.
Yeah, I'm with you. We found out when we had our boys. As we take you back a year ago, what a day it was here at the Glen for the 11. And again, just further proving what a good road course racer Denny Hamlin is.
Very, very smooth through turn one. He let other drivers make the mistake and was there to capitalize. And in the end, the two got into the back of the 78, but I don't think that mattered much. The 11 looked like he had him cleared very easily out of turn 7 to the line.
In addition to what he has achieved in Sonoma, Denny Hamlin has made himself a really handy road racer. And that pays off big when you're talking about the playoffs. Back in a moment. You're watching Monster Energy Cup Series practice here on your home of motorsport, NBCSN, as we welcome you back to Watkins Glen International. We're currently under a red flag. Tell you about that in a moment. There's nothing like attending an event like this, and this season has been full of some of the most intense side-by-side racing in years and even more dramatic moments than ever before. Visit NASCAR.com/tickets to purchase tickets and make new NASCAR memories at places like this. The reason for the stoppage in this one, folks, is Boris Said making his final Monster Energy Cup Series appearance after some 31 years of racing. This is what happened to Boris in the inner loop.
Yeah, it just looks like he overcooks the entry. Couldn't commit to that first right-hand turn. The back was moving around a little bit, perhaps the wheel hop or just a loose condition. Has to abort, go straight, and heavy damage to the nose of that 33 from going through the grass area.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit of a inexperience with this splitter. For guys that race every week and you get in trouble, you're better off spinning in practice, right? You're better off, veering away and spinning rather than running through the grass. We've seen how much damage had been done by the grass with splitters, and, sometimes you get in trouble. He bailed out to the left, right? Because he doesn't race these cars every week. He doesn't really know that it's going to tear the splitter off. So I think Parker, a guy with a lot of experience, maybe he just spins the car. Maybe he just turns left and goes straight to the inner loop, doesn't try to make it, understanding that the splitter is going to get ripped off that car.
Exactly, Jeff. You would want to just go to that runoff you have there in the inner loop. That's what it's there for. You overcook the brakes. You just decide, you know what, I'm not going to make the corner. No reason to go through the grass because the splitter can catch the front end and do what it did there. And then you come to a full stop. I saw a couple cars do it last practice. And then you wait for everyone to go by and accelerate and continue on your way. And that's why that's there, and why the drivers are able to push it so far into that braking zone is because you have that available runoff. So maybe just as you said, a bad choice there in terms of maybe not bailing out of the corner quick enough.
Yeah, it's easy for us to say, right, Parker? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
It's when things happen so quickly, those things you build off of experience, and without his ability, his opportunity to have the experience of these splitters, the decision making he made was different than somebody that had 100 races with these splitters.
There's a snapshot of Boris's accomplishments, and as we mentioned, 31 years of racing. There was a famous sports car team owner, Tom Milner, and Tom said this kid was sleeping in his pickup truck, and he said all I could see were these giant feet out the door, out the window, and he was just there hanging out outside of PTG, and he said I just had to bug him until he gave me a ride. That's how determined. That's how it all started out some 31 years ago for Boris Said, and he's done many Cup, Xfinity races, sports car races. He's done it all. Kel?
And Leigh, as you said, he's announced that this will be his final start in the Monster Energy Cup Series. I saw him just a few minutes before practice started, and he said, you know what? We're building this house out in Utah, and for the first time I was headed out to go racing, I was thinking more about building that house than I was about racing, so I know that the timing is right to hang it up. Boris, of course, has a lot of other interests in business, some car dealerships in Southern California. He'll be missed around the paddock here, even though it's only on occasion that he comes by. Certainly a colorful personality, but Boris seemed really at peace with his decision to hang it up after this weekend.
And anyone who's watched any kind of racing with Boris in it knows what a character he is. He's the dealer principal at BMW of Murrieta, and he said, didn't really know what work was until I got this dealership. He said, we made racing look easy. And there's Boris. Some work to do for the Circle Sport team, but he'll be back. So will we.
Since 1954, STP has been on the leading edge of performance, helping engines run better longer. For the latest info on NASCAR, visit NBCSports.com/Inside the Garage.
And you can catch all the action of NASCAR here on NBC with the NBC Sports app. Get closer with alternate camera angles, driver stats, and track information. That app sure is handy for everything on NBC Sports. Watkins Glen. It is a famous road course, and it all began in the years following World War II. And that man there, Big Boris, said, took our Rutledge Wood for a run around the original racetrack around the streets and roads of Watkins Glen.
Franklin Street, Watkins Glen, 1949. The second Grand Prix brought 39 entrants.
Just think how hard it was to drive those cars. And they were probably going pretty fast, huh?
I think this is really good for our hair. I like this. Oh, here's the old railroad tracks.
Yep. And what if they had a pretty good compression right here? Like, oh, yeah.
Oh, there it is.
That sounds pretty cool.
I thought you were going to... No, that makes sense, though. We should both go hands up.
So here's where you come up with hard braking. So the end of this brake zone, right? They're hard, and now they turn down into this hill. Oh. And this is the tight part. Where you go down the hill, hard braking. And then look how narrow this bridge is.
Come on!
It is fantastic. Thanks to Boris for doing that for our Rutledge Wood. And sorry that he's out of the car and out of the driving suit. But folks, just so you know, if you've never been up here, that there was nothing special about that. They are public roads now. The old racetrack, open to the public. People drive on them every day. And if you come up to Watkins Glen, there's the International Motor Racing Research Centre, which relies on donations and relies on people's generosity. They can tell you all about the original track here, and it is very cool.
So I think it's interesting. That's where you get your information. Mine was the restaurant down there on the corner with the bar and the grill that has the pictures on the wall.
Yeah.
But that's really the point. Is it's not just about this famed racetrack at the top of the hill. It's all about the towns down in the valley, down the hill, and when you go into all those local establishments, and they're scattered all over town, there's something about that old track. This was either the left-hand corner or the corner before the railroad tracks, or they were built years ago kind of along the old racetrack. It's really a great trip to come up here and watch some racing.
You're talking about the Glen Motor Inn?
Oh, big fan of the Glen Motor Inn. Matter of fact, Boris said, I think I've actually been in the Glen Motor Inn with Boris said, talking about going with royalty. And easy to get a table with Boris.
And I've been there with David Hobbs. That's racing royalty as well. But speaking of Boris said, I think he's with you, Marty, isn't he?
Indeed, certainly some fun memories here at Watkins Glen for Boris and a lot of the people, but we'll talk about your final weekend, which didn't go too well there in final practice. What happened?
Driver error, really. You know, I just got in the bus stop a little hot, and instead of spinning out, I just rolled through the grass, and you know, there was like a low spot and just tore the nose off. I didn't think it was going to be any big deal, and you know, it's just a mistake, you know, not doing it every week and coming in so infrequently. It just, man, I feel bad for the guys, but hopefully we can get this car back together.
I was going to ask, is it a backup car situation? What's the situation with that?
Well, it's not really a road course car, and this car is a pretty good road course car, so hopefully they can work some magic and glue and duct tape and get it back together, I hope. But I feel bad I did this. It just, man, it's been a lot of years coming here, and I've had a lot of good races, bad races. I've screwed up my fair share like any other driver, but I hate ending it like this, but it was all on me today.
How about running the old course downtown with Rutledge? How much fun was that?
That was pretty fun, you know. There's a good skit in there where I gave him a brake check and scared the crap out of him, but that was pretty fun. But, no, I mean, I couldn't imagine racing here in 1948. What those guys did on these streets was amazing. You know, I don't think there's any driver out here that would do that. So, but it must have been something to see in the old day.
How about that, Diff? That's a little tease from Boris. A brake check coming up in that feature. Should be fun to see that, won't it?
Hey, it's always excitement whenever Boris is involved, that's for sure.
Yeah, and to be clear, Rutledge scares easily. So, you know, but, you know, he took the brunt of that responsibility. But, you know, we talked about, you know, he doesn't have the experience a lot of these other guys. And that's what he would have done in every other race car he's ever driven. Just slow down, run the thing through the grass. It's going to be okay. But with this car with the splitter, it just ripped the splitter and ripped the nose off of it. So, yeah, his inexperience caught up with him. But was it realistic to think that he should even know that? Probably not. So, you know, that's just an odd situation. But he took the responsibility, but he shouldn't bear it all.
Well, sometimes it's easy to see how busy these drivers are on their in-car cameras working the shifter and working the steering wheel. But we have a unique view of Kevin Harvick. We can really see just how busy these drivers are. We're going to take a little peek down at Kevin Harvick's feet, and he'll show us just how busy you have to be to get into these braking zones. You heard Boris said, a road course expert, talk about the mistake he made getting into the bus stop. Well, Jeff, this is how busy the feet are to try to get around this road course.
Yeah, so you can see what, you know, he obviously using the brake pedal right there. He will not, you watch him probably really never ever touches the clutch. Sometimes on an upshift, he'll use the clutch just because you think it might help. He's not using the clutch at all, but watch his foot action as he goes to downshift. Now he's braking, but watch his foot right there. That's when you downshift. If you don't tap that throttle and make RPMs and you downshift, it will wheel hop it because the engine is turning the RPMs. Too many RPMs, not enough RPMs to put it in gear. You've got to get those RPMs. So again, going into turn one where we see so much wheel hop, he's off the throttle right now. Now watch it. Boom, right there. That's when he downshifts. That sync of your foot, getting all that synchronized, that is what makes proper shift and parking.
And you know, Jeff, as he comes to turn two, you see him nursing that throttle, and then he drops the hammer for that uphill run to turn three. Feathers it through three, back off, back on, back off, back on, and then buries the throttle coming through turn four and all the way up the back straightaway. And then that's when the braking fun starts there at the entrance to the bus stop.
It is, and you see him do that little bit of tap on the brake right before he smashes it all the way down to get slowed down for the corner. That's a little safety check. You'll do that throughout every lap of the race and into every corner because that's just putting the pads right on the rotor and making sure those brakes are there and the pedal is stiff so that when you slam that brake down the next corner, you know it's there, Jeff.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, on the highway, they teach you to drive with 1 foot, right? You take 1 foot, you know, the gas pedal and the brake pedal. But you can see he's not using the clutch. But the reason that he is using both feet is because you can do it so much quicker. It's silly to use 1 foot to go from the brake pedal to the gas pedal, switch it back and forth. With these transmissions, keep your left foot on the brake, right foot on the pedal. No need to switch. It makes everything happen quicker.
Harvick sits 6th in the order at the moment. Jamie McMurray, Brad Keselowski, Truex, Kurt Busch, Denny Hamlin, and then Kevin.
Here's Matt Kenseth now up turn two and through the S's. Keep your eyes on Matt Kenseth this weekend. We've made a lot of conversation about drivers that need a win. Matt Kenseth needs a win, and he needs it very badly. And Matt Kenseth could be the sleeper in this race tomorrow.
Great shot here as he goes over the first curve of the inner loop, the second curve. I actually saw he sparks as he goes over the final part of the inner loop right now. The only car I'm seeing do that, and it just means he's bottomed out. He's being very aggressive over the curves. He's trying to make it as straight a line as possible and using all the exit here off the carousel down to turn 6.
Yes, he is using all the exit. What a great shot. You can see how close he gets to the grass to set himself up for the left-hander. Didn't quite get to the bottom of that left-hander, over that curve again. Now, you can just see, if you don't use these curves, you don't make speed. He's 16th in points. He has 17-point cushion. That's not many points. He has no road course wins, but he's been top 10 in the last 3 races here. So we've seen Matt Kenseth improve as a road racer, and he's going to need to bring that all on Sunday.
Well, Mike Bagley mentioned about a sleeper in the pack in Matt Kenseth. Steve Letarte, how about this man in the 14? Clint Boyer. Good road course racer, and also in the same department, if you wish, that is needing a win.
He does need a win, but only 17 points below the cut line. I think that he has a chance of making it in the playoffs on points, but I think that's what makes it more dangerous for a win. He doesn't have the pressure of a must win. I think sometimes relaxing behind the wheel, relaxing on top of the pit box, not kick your feet up and not care, but just enjoy what you're doing and be able to focus with no distractions is exactly what the 14 needs to do. That may be the reason that they can go to victory lane.
Good run too at Sonoma. He was solid at Sonoma.
And he's won at Sonoma before. He knows what he's doing behind the wheel. And you talk about this fast racetrack, I think it suits a more standardized stock car driver like Clint Boyer. It's not just about rear tire grip. It's also about carrying momentum, especially up to these S's.
Well, we just saw Boris said a few moments ago, and we're talking about big characters in the sport. This guy, Clint Boyer, comes under that umbrella as well. We want to tell you about tomorrow after the race is finished. We've got our next episode of Racing Roots with Kyle Petty and Rutledge Wood, and this man in the 14 is the star of the show.
Checkered flag and the win to Clint Boyer.
I tell you what, you spend a couple minutes in Kansas and you realize this is why Dorothy didn't want to leave.
Hi, boys.
Hey, there he is.
Don't is that a cattle prod? You want one? Let's all get one.
Is this heaven?
This is how it all got started. Is it real tubing or muffler tubing?
I think it's muffler tubing.
Think we can find them?
Oh, there they are.
Good job, Cash.
You saw baby ones?
This is where legends come from.
Rarely is Rutledge Wood in any sort of feature and be not the biggest personality in the feature. And I think that's the case with Clint Boyer. He's exactly the same person behind the wheel as he is in the garage here, as he is on his, out in his hometown. I was fortunate enough to go back to his hometown. They did a little bit of charity work, and they had a fundraiser one night, and Jeff Burton and myself, we flew out there and joined in the fundraiser. And I'm going to tell you, I see how he got like he was because the whole town loves him, and he is definitely the center of attention.
You know the old saying, "Oh, come on, let's have a laugh. Let's have a laugh." That's him.
Oh, absolutely.
That's him. That's
but
him.
don't let that humor fool you.
Right.
When he puts that helmet on, he wants to win. And I think that's where people can get in trouble because, oh, it's lighthearted Clint Boyer. Well, you give him an inch, he's going to take a mile, and that's what he has to do to win at the Cup Series.
And I think for Clint Boyer fans, they're pleased to see him in this ride after the year that he endured last year. It's been a long time since he's been to victory lane. We'll see if he can get there tomorrow here at the Glen. 24.5 minutes remaining in final practice. If you're into Premier League, it is back. It returns Friday at 2:45 p.m. Eastern on NBCSN. It's the first ever Friday night opener in the Premier League. It's Arsenal hosting Leicester City. And then on Saturday, your Premier League morning gets going at 7 Eastern with Premier League Live, followed by Watford and Liverpool. Premier League is back for another season on NBCSN. We're back at the Glen. Leigh Diffey, Steve Letarte, and then our guys around the track. In the S's is Mike Bagley. The carousel is Parker Kligerman. Jeff Burton is outside turn 6. The guys are having fun trackside. Boys, what have you been noticing? What's caught your attention?
Well, Lee, the first thing I've noticed in this practice session, this is a lot calmer than the first practice session. We had several cars go around. Jimmy Johnson wheel hopped into the turn number 1. Everybody has been minding their P's and Q's, which I'm sure is the music to the ears of a lot of these crew chiefs, where they don't need to worry about backup cars or repairing any damage because time is precious trying to get these cars dialed in for tomorrow. Everything is clean and green here in the S's, at least for now.
Bagman, I'm kind of noticing the same thing in the first practice. Coming out of the inner loop, I saw so many cars get absolutely sideways. I actually saw Kyle Busch look like he was trying out for the D1 drifting series at one point coming into the carousel here. And actually in this practice, though, I've seen a lot less of that. I've seen a lot more tidiness out of the cars. The drivers seem to be a little bit more comfortable with these race cars. They seem to figure it out a little bit more. And that's natural, of course. That's why we practice. We start to learn the track, learn what the car wants, learn the tire that Goodyear has brought. All those things start to add up, and I'm seeing it down here. But I just know, Jeff, as they come off the carousel, I'm seeing these cars continually, even though they're getting better, they're continuing to look totally on edge through the exit.
They really do. Off the exit, the carousel, jumping that curb. But I got to tell you, in 6 and 7, it's pretty tame down here. I'm jealous of what you guys are watching. But I think come tomorrow, when we've got this passing zone in turn 6, I think the intensity is going to pick up. And so many times I see people try to make a move in turn 7. We saw earlier the last lap of the race last week. Last year, the 78 car got spun around. That place is not a good place to pass. So even though today's been pretty calm for me, I think tomorrow this will be an exciting spot to be.
Well, Lee, we heard Mike Bagley talk about how time was so precious. Well, time is what happened to the 42 of Kyle Larson. He had a penalty, 30-minute penalty in this 50-minute practice. The 42 of Kyle Larson had a 30-minute penalty. The 10 of Danica Patrick, 18 of Kyle Busch, 37 of Chris Buescher, and 77 of Eric Jones all had 30 minutes. That's well over half of a 50-minute practice. They've been sitting on pit road.
And again, showing you why Kyle Larson had that 30-minute penalty. Go back a week ago, Pocono.
Yeah, so all the cars stop on pit road post-race to get the lug nuts inspected, try to keep it relatively orderly, and you see the inspectors out there, which makes it a safety concern. And Kyle Larson kind of lights the rear tires up. NASCAR was not pleased with that situation. They didn't think that was the time nor the place for that, so they held him 30 minutes, which on a 2-day show, I think is an even bigger penalty than normal, Marty.
Big penalty, and especially when you don't get to road course race that often, right? So it's a huge penalty for the 42 team finally getting on the track. You know, when we come to Watkins Glen, we always think of A.J. Allmendinger as one of the guys you're going to have to beat here. They struggled in that first practice session. The car was so free. And, Jeff, you know, it's kind of funny. You guys talking about all those guys kind of sliding around the racetrack in that first practice session. They've gotten the 47 a lot better. But A.J. told me between sessions, he said, hey, I think a lot of us are getting used to this lower downforce here at Watkins Glen. The things we used to be able to do, we just can't do. We just don't have that rear downforce like we used to have here. So that's why they're struggling with their car being loose on the 47. And I wonder if the drivers are really having to adapt with the first time coming here with that lower downforce package.
Well, and Marty having to adapt in a quicker amount of time. I mean, you know, 2-day show, essentially 2 50-minute practices. That's not a lot of practice in comparison to what you normally have. So, you know, when you come to a place where things are different, the drivers that adapt the quickest, the teams that adapt the quickest, they're the ones that run the fastest lap time. So identifying where you need to give up some speed to overall get more speed with lower downforce on a road course, that's where it's difficult, and that's where the drivers are learning to relay that information to the teams about where their cars need to be better.
Can the Dinger do it again at the Glen is the question to be answered, and we'll get closer to that with qualifying tomorrow. And then the I Love New York 355 at the Glen. Welcome back. This is the final practice session for the Monster Energy Cup Series and the final road course of the year in the championship. And a reminder that NASCAR is on NBCSN all weekend here at the Glen. Today, it's Xfinity Series racing presented by Shell Rotella, and that coverage begins at 1:30 with Countdown to Green. 2 o'clock, the race will begin. And tomorrow, Monster Energy Cup Series here at the Glen from 3 to help you structure your weekend. Well, here is the man who just put it on the pole position for that Xfinity Series race this afternoon. Joey Logano is going for 3 wins in succession from the pole position, but that's only part of the picture. This is what counts.
And I think this is the whole reason we see him in that car today in the Xfinity race is just laps, experience. Even at a track that he has won at, a win today could perhaps be the biggest win of his career. And that's saying a lot from a guy that has won some of the biggest races. But right now, on the outside, looking in the playoff picture and looking like a must-win to try to make it into the playoff.
How does he look through the S's, Bagman?
He looks a tad on the loose side right there, transitioning from 2 into 3. Otherwise than that, he's pretty solid, and he's quickly back on the throttle. When he drops the hammer through 4, he gets a great run up the back straightaway, and it looks like he's getting the better run into the inner loop, Parker.
Yeah, Bagman, you'd be right to say he was loose. I actually got to speak to his crew chief, Todd Gordon, in between the first practice and this practice. I asked him, what'd you feel about the car? And he said, you know, we're just searching for rear grip. And I asked him, well, why is that? Why are you searching for rear grip? And he pointed to that rear spoiler, the lower downforce. This team just feels like they maybe were caught off guard a little bit with having the right setup with this lower downforce, Jeff.
Well, since he's been driving his 22 car, he's never finished out of the top 10 here. So this is one of his best racetracks on a weekend that he needs it to be one of his best racetracks. In 15, he won the Xfinity race and the Cup race. So that's the kind of weekend he's going to need to have leaving here if he wants to make these playoffs.
And at the moment, Logano, who looks slightly unstable in certain parts of the track, as the bagman said, looks a little loose going through the S's, is down in 15th in this final practice session with just over 13 minutes remaining. Kyle Busch on screen.
And can you believe, Lee, that last week that win broke over a year winless drought for Kyle Busch? Hard to imagine as fast as we have seen this 18 at times, and that speed has continued. Very, very quick in first practice this morning. That speed continues. That lap right there puts him inside the top 5 here in final practice.
10 races, the last 10 races, 10 different winners in Cup Series competition. It speaks to the competitive nature of the series.
You would be mistaken not to include him on the short list to win this race tomorrow. He is extremely stable in the S's. Kyle Busch is just smooth everywhere on this road course. In turn 1, 2, 3, and 4, the S's, and no doubt he's getting through the interloop quite well as well.
That he is, and you cannot deny that he's probably one of the most talented race car drivers in the world. And for all the fans down here in the interlude, they are getting an incredible show watching Kyle Busch jump over those curves. He's one of the most aggressive down here to watch, and also one of the fastest as he uses all the track. Coming down to you, Jeff.
Using all that track, builds his momentum coming down this long straightaway. Remember, this is a great passing zone. Heavy braking right here. You saw the car move around just a little bit, overdrove that corner. Didn't get to the bottom, but that's what you have to do in practice. You have to push the car to find its limits so you know what it won't do. Drivers like Kyle Busch have the confidence to put themselves in that position.
Parker mentioned the fans here at Watkins Glen. I want to say well done and thank you to the fans of Xfinity and Monster Energy Cup, because tomorrow is a sellout for the 3rd year in succession, and that is huge.
And no one would love to give those fans a show more than the 47 of A.J. Allmendinger, coming back to the site of his one and only career Cup win here at Watkins Glen. A definite must-win if he wants to race into the postseason.
There is no doubt he's got to swing for the fences tomorrow, Stevie, and that team knows it, and he knows it as well. The question is, does he have car enough to do it, and also can he keep focus? Marty mentioned a moment ago about how things are different now with this aerodynamic package. I would imagine that would weigh on his mind pretty heavily going into this race.
That it would, and one of the biggest questions about AJ when he comes to these road courses is how much pressure is he putting on himself, and we can see it, and you see it when you talk to him. I talked to him in between these 2 practices, and he was not in a mood to talk when the car wasn't good, because he knows this is a chance to win. He knows this is one of his best shots to get in the playoffs, and so he takes all that pressure and really tries to exude it on the racetrack, and sometimes it doesn't go right.
Well, making the playoffs or not making the playoffs, that can determine whether you had a successful year or not. So with the way this team runs on the road courses, the pressure is there to win here. And if you can't win here, you may not have a chance to make the playoffs. And going to your sponsors, going to people that you're trying to recruit, to bring them into your company, being a playoff contender is very important in that recruiting process.
Can we skip the Q run and just keep working on it?
So you see right here, as he's entering turn 6, he just carried a lot of speed trying to hammer down. Just could not slow the car down enough, could not accelerate out of the corner. But what's the harm, right? This is one of the places on the racetrack where you have runoff. And as I mentioned with Kyle Busch, you have to, as a driver, be willing to overdrive the corner entry, get yourself in over your head a little bit. There's a bail-off zone here. There's a place to go. There's a place to get the car slowed down and come in the pit. So I like that move. I like to see drivers push the car past its limit so they learn what it can do on old tires, on hot tires, so when the race starts, they can take advantage of it.
So, Jeff, obviously, as we know, years ago, that used to be a gravel trap, and that would have been Dinger caught there, and we would have been under another red flag. Had a legitimately good question on Twitter this morning, and, you know, we know the answer, but let's address it publicly. One of the fans was saying, when there's so much asphalt there, why doesn't NASCAR administer track limits? And my response was, well, if the asphalt's there, the drivers will use it, right? Because that was a bailout scenario there for AJ. But right in front of you tomorrow and this afternoon, they're going to be using that as part of the racetrack. So what's your answer and what's your response?
Well, you would need a track limit if it was an advantage to be out here, you know, just before the gravel pit. So if you're out here in the asphalt off the racetrack, there's no advantage gained unless you're trying to miss a wreck or something. There is a track limit in the interlude. So up where Parker is, if you miss the interlude and you drive straight through, you have to stop. If you don't stop, it's a penalty. So, but here, if you're off the racetrack and on this extra asphalt, let's call it, there's no advantage. So there's no need to have a penalty. So it's all determined by, are you gaining an advantage by not staying on the designated race course? But of course, this is NASCAR, man. We go everywhere.
Jeff, you're going to use every bit of racetrack you can. Come on, don't say you're going to obey those track limits. For A.J. Allmendinger and his race team, they had made some genuine progress on the car in the first half of this practice session. Got in the top 10, and then after that last run, we saw A.J. kind of bail out there, as we've been talking about. He said the car's back to being evil, and you heard him briefly when he was coming to the garage area. He said, hey, can we just bail on making the mock qualifying run, and just work on race trim? That's what he asked Ernie Cope. You see Ernie talking to him right now through the window. So A.J. wants to, Steve, continue to focus on race trim. We'll worry about qualifying trim when we're actually qualifying tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, that's really my biggest concern, Marty, is for someone who has the experience of A.J. Allmendinger at a road course in race trim, I would expect him to be farther from the limit, Lee. I wouldn't expect him using that bailout area.
Yes, you can expect all of that and a whole lot more this afternoon and tomorrow. Wonderful weekend of racing here at Watkins Glen. And speaking of racing, Usain Bolt, the sprinting legend, will run in the 100 meters for the final time in the World Track and Field Championships. By the way, that's where Rick Allen is. That's where I'm here with Steve and the gang, and next weekend in Michigan as well. And that will be something special. What a moment. And that's a little later this afternoon, 4:45 over on NBC. So we've got all the racing covered for you today, Steve.
This is it. This is the place to be. Watkins Glen International will have the Xfinity race later, but this 88, Marty, man, 30th in practice so far with under 4 minutes left. It just does not seem to be a very smooth day for the 88.
Wow, 3.5 minutes left. You see Junior kind of trying to find some clean racetrack right now. As you said, Steve, just 30th fastest. Take a listen on the radio to just a few of the problems for the 88.
Steering pretty bad. There's like a big dead spot in the steering wheel where I turn the wheel and nothing happens, and then the car's wandering around down the straightaway, down the back straightaway, down that straightaway into turn 10. The car just wandering around on the racetrack, across the track, left and right, locking the right front tire up into turn 10 and into turn 1 like it's got way too much camber.
And you see him bailing out again after just one lap. Not very happy with the 88. And he also said, I just have no speed, guys. I don't know what to tell you. I just have no speed out here. So a frustrating final practice here at Watkins Glen for Dale Earnhardt Jr.
Well, and Marty, not only for Dale Earnhardt Jr., but Jeff, the whole Hendrick Motorsports group are not in very promising positions.
Yeah, no, they're not. And where I'm standing is right at the entrance. He called it turn 10 because on the track map, it is turn 10 because of the boot, but we don't run the boot, so we call it turn 6. And his car, Dale Jr.'s, does not brake well. When he goes to the brakes, the car moves and darts. You can really see the car moving around a lot, and that is not a comforting feeling on a place where you are moving. There's a lot of speed as you go to that braking zone. The other issue, think about Dale Jr., we don't road race a lot. Remember, he did not run this race last year. He was out with his injury, so he's not. This is the first time he's been here in 2 years, so that plays a factor too, in my opinion.
Well, and that we talk about the schedule, and we keep talking about the schedule, but those 2 50-minute practices are going to hurt a driver more that doesn't come here all the time. We see the 11. I think he's coasting in after a qualifying run. It looks taped up, close to solid, a little bit of water coming out of the cowl. It's a long way around here. We talk about laps and lap time. Well, a good lap is like 1:10 seconds. So it takes, a 1:20 to get up to speed, 1:10 to finish your lap, 1:30, maybe 1:45 to coast back into the pit road. So that's like a 3.5 to 4 minute cycle there. When we look forward to qualifying tomorrow afternoon, we have to watch traffic, Lee, because traffic will be an issue, as you see Brad Keselowski right here catching Clint Boyer. And we have to just look at the time clock, because there is not a lot of time if you have an issue and you run into traffic to come in and kind of reload for another lap.
Final minute of final practice, and the 2 for Team Penske of Brad Keselowski has looked very stable. It's looked planted throughout this session. Really quick and promising signs going into qualifying and the race tomorrow. Just going back to Dale Earnhardt Jr., I know you were busy last weekend, but did you see his comments Pocono when he was asked about road course racing and how did he get better at road course racing, and taking you back into your own career, he said, well, Letard and all of us used to race around and chase our tails at Road Atlanta and at VIR, and we'd wear everybody out and make everybody tired. And he said, I got better at road course racing when I stopped trying.
Well, Sonoma one year, we always used to go test. We'd unload in Sonoma, and it was an absolute disaster. So finally one year, we said, you know what? I'm done. I'm done building new cars. I'm done trying to test. It's 2 races a year. We're just going to go have fun. Man, we ran in the top 5, his first ever career top 10 at Sonoma. And instantly we learned that, hey, he's better at this if you just kind of let him go with no expectations. And I think that's the battle he's going to have in the second half of this season as we see time expiring in practice, is don't put the expectations of it's your final season. Somehow compartmentalize that into the enjoyment of your final season. Easier said than done, but I think if he can find a way to do that, we're going to see more and more speed out of the 88.
But unfortunately, the 88 finishes the session in 31st position.
Well, the other half of speed is you have to have a car that drives good. And we heard on the radio he was not pleased with his so far.
Well, and just look at AJ Allmendinger as well. The Dinger finishes down in 17th position. Michael McDowell, we mentioned him a little earlier, in 7th. Very promising session. What a great afternoon ahead we have for you. Countdown to Green coming up next. It is the Zippo 200 here at the Glen Xfinity Series Racing, and it's stacked with Cup stars who, of course, have just finished their final practice session in the lead up to tomorrow's I Love New York 355 at the Glen. There is so much going on here in a beautiful part of the world and a magnificent racetrack. Been a pretty eventful day as far as the Cup Series is concerned, especially that first session, which was very much abbreviated for all the stoppages and spins and crashes. That one was a little more straightforward, but there's still some big storylines coming out of that session.
Well, there are, and I think, as you mentioned, that first practice session was a little chaotic because the teams are still getting used to the low downforce. We don't keep talking about it at the ovals because they've had all year long. Coming here to Watkins Glen, the fastest road course we're going to see, it's definitely affecting the cars. But when I look at speed, the 18 of Kyle Busch is a standout. The 11 of Denny Hamlin won here last year. He looks very good. The 2 of Brad Keselowski. Then it's kind of a mix. Mid-pack, there are a lot of big names, and this is an important race. You look at Joey Logano, Clint Boyer, Matt Kenseth. That playoff picture is becoming reality. With only 5 more races until the cutoff, these drivers have to find victory lane, or at least points if they don't end up in victory lane.
As we went to the break, I said, look at Michael McDowell in the 95, who's in 7th place. If he qualifies well, can he stay towards the front?
Well, I think Michael McDowell can. The question is, can his pit crew, can his team? I know they all want to, but it's very different running 15th inside the top 5. I think he can drive inside the top 5 today.
Pretty promising and productive session, Kelly, for Jamie McMurray.
Yeah, look quick. I know this is a team that certainly would like to get a win and ensure their way into the playoffs. Jamie, how was the balance in the one car?
Yeah, McDonald Chevy was good. The Gibbs cars are the best cars, just looking at the lap times. But we're in that next group, and we did a qualifying run at the beginning to kind of see where we're going to be. Then we did a sticker run in the middle, and then we ran it out of gas, and that's basically all the practice we had. But we unloaded, I thought, fairly close. So we'll see tomorrow. The stages are going to break this up. It's going to be interesting to see how strategy works out. Fuel mileage will be an issue like normal, but McDonald Chevy's pretty good.
All right, Jamie Mack looking for his first win here at the Glen. Diff?
Good stuff. Sounds positive, doesn't it? Don't go anywhere, folks. Xfinity Series Racing on NBCSN coming up next at 2 Eastern. And Countdown to Green is next with Rutledge Wood, Kyle Petty, and DJ, our very own Dale Jarrett. See you in a moment.